Have you ever wondered how some broadcasters seem to speak English effortlessly, almost as if the language itself flows through them? You hear them on TV, radio, or podcasts, and it feels natural, polished, confident. Their words roll off the tongue with such ease that it makes you question if you could ever get there. Today we're going to take you behind the scenes, not just into what they say but how they think, how they train, and how you can start speaking English with that same kind of fluidity. It all begins with a story, one that might sound familiar. Imagine a young person, let's call her Emma. She's sitting in her bedroom, headphones on, staring at the screen of her laptop. She's watching a news anchor on TV, mesmerized by the way they articulate every word. But when she tries to read out loud, her sentences stumble, her words feel heavy, and confidence slips away before she even finishes a single paragraph. Emma wonders if she's missing some secret, some hidden talent that broadcasters have that she simply doesn't. Here's the first secret. There is no secret. Broadcasters aren't born fluent. They've built their fluency brick by brick over months and years, and it all starts with listening differently. Most learners hear English like it's a foreign sound, something separate from their life. Broadcasters don't just hear it, they feel it. They notice the rises and falls, the pauses, the way emotion sneaks into every syllable. And you can learn to do this too. You don't need a TV studio or a microphone. All you need is the willingness to listen actively. Imagine Emma again. This time, she closes her eyes while listening to a news segment. She doesn't just hear the words. She tracks the rhythm, the pacing, the tiny glances of emphasis that make a sentence sound alive. She starts mimicking, softly at first, matching the intonation, the flow, the speed. And something surprising happens. Her words start to feel lighter, less forced. She begins to realize that fluency isn't about knowing every word. It's about breathing with the language. Many people think that vocabulary alone will make them fluent. But ask any broadcaster and they'll tell you a different story. It's not the words you know, it's how you connect them. Broadcasters use a technique called chunking. Instead of thinking about each word individually, they group words into meaningful chunks, like small building blocks of thought. For example, instead of saying, "I will try to understand the news," they naturally say, "I'll try to follow the news," almost effortlessly. And our brains, when trained to recognize chunks, speak faster, more naturally, and more confidently. Emma starts practicing this too. She reads out loud, not word by word, but phrase by phrase. She starts recording herself, listening back, noticing where her voice drags or where it feels flat. And here's a moment you can relate to. The first few recordings feel terrible. She sounds awkward, hesitant, almost embarrassed. But that's exactly the point. Broadcasters often spend years in that terrible first draft phase, repeating phrases until their mouth knows what their brain already understands. And speaking of the brain, here's another fascinating insight. Broadcasters train their minds to think in English, not just translate from their native language. Many learners mentally convert from their first language, word by word, which slows everything down. Broadcasters, on the other hand, immerse themselves so deeply that English becomes a direct thought, a natural expression. Emma begins experimenting with this too. She starts journaling in English, narrating her day, thinking about small actions like making breakfast or walking the dog, all in English. It's awkward at first, but every sentence she forms strengthens the neural pathways that lead to fluent speech. But fluency isn't just mental, it's physical. You might be surprised, but broadcasters train their voices just like singers do. They learn to control breath, modulate tone, and even relax their tongue and lips to make speech smoother. Emma starts noticing her own tension. Her jaw feels tight, her tongue stiff. She begins doing small exercises, reading aloud with exaggerated mouth movements, practicing long sentences while controlling her breath. Slowly, words start coming out cleaner, sharper, easier. And every time she hears herself improve, it creates a little spark of motivation that keeps her going. Here's a critical turning point most learners overlook: the power of repetition combined with attention. Broadcasters don't just repeat phrases, they repeat with awareness. They listen, imitate, record, adjust, and repeat again. Emma adopts this. She picks a short segment from her favorite news broadcast, listens to it 10 times, mimics it 10 times, and then records herself. At first, she notices every flaw, every hesitation, every awkward stress. But over time, something magical happens. Her voice starts to flow naturally, and her brain begins predicting what comes next. She starts feeling what broadcasters call the groove of English, a rhythm that almost carries you along effortlessly. And here's a little challenge for you. Imagine trying to speak English for 3 minutes without stopping, only using sentences you've practiced before in the rhythm you've learned. Broadcasters do this every day on air, but you can try it too. It's not about perfection. It's about training your brain and voice to keep moving even if you stumble. That momentum builds confidence, and confidence is the fuel behind fluency. Now let's talk about mistakes. Broadcasters make them constantly, but here's the twist: they embrace them. You might think every pause, every mispronunciation is a failure. But on air, a broadcaster doesn't panic. They continue, they correct naturally, and the audience barely notices. Emma learns this too. She starts practicing in front of friends, reading paragraphs out loud, making errors, laughing at herself, and moving on. And every time she allows herself to fail, she becomes a little more fearless, a little closer to speaking like a professional. At this point, you might be asking, this all sounds great, but how do they sound so effortless? Even after practicing, it's still different. Here's where the real secret comes in. Broadcasters have developed what I like to call mental fluency muscle. It's the ability to anticipate language, to predict what will come next, to speak without stopping. Emma notices this when she watches live broadcasts. She sees how anchors prepare their thoughts but don't read word for word. They know the structure, the flow, and the emotion, and that knowledge allows them to focus on delivery instead of translation. She begins to practice this too, speaking about her day in English without a script, letting thoughts flow naturally even if imperfect. And we can't forget one more element that keeps broadcasters at the top of their game: curiosity. They are constantly learning new words, new expressions, new ways to connect ideas. Emma starts following this pattern. She writes down interesting phrases she hears, practices them, and integrates them into her speech. Over weeks, her vocabulary stops feeling like a list of words. It becomes a toolkit for expression. And that, ultimately, is what makes English sound alive, confident, and fluent. Before we pause this journey, here's a little insight to hold on to. Fluency isn't about perfection, grammar, or accent. It's about rhythm, anticipation, connection, and courage. Broadcasters speak fluently because they practice these every single day. Emma isn't special. She just decided to do what broadcasters do, step by step, with awareness, patience, and determination. And that's the point: you can do it too. So, here's the takeaway from this first step. Start listening differently, mimic with purpose, practice in chunks, think in English, train your voice, embrace mistakes, and keep your curiosity alive. It's not instant and it's not easy, but the process itself transforms you. And if you think this is where the journey ends, think again. The next part will take you even deeper into how broadcasters master not just words but emotion, persuasion, and storytelling. You'll see exactly how they make every sentence feel compelling, and how you can apply these techniques to your own speech, even if you've struggled for years. Because here's the truth: fluency isn't about speaking like someone else. It's about becoming the best version of your own English voice. And Emma's journey has only just begun. Emma had been practicing for weeks and something had started to shift. Her voice felt lighter, her sentences flowed a little more naturally, and she could speak for longer periods without that familiar hesitation creeping in. But there was something she hadn't realized yet. Fluency isn't just about sounding correct. It's about being compelling, about connecting with people the way broadcasters do. And that was the next level she needed to reach. One evening, Emma watched a live news broadcast not just to hear the words, but to observe the energy behind them. The anchor wasn't just reading sentences, she was telling a story. Her voice rose and fell at the right moments, her pauses were perfectly timed, and every sentence carried a subtle emotion. Emma realized that this was the secret behind what makes a broadcaster captivating. Emotion in motion. They don't just speak English, they breathe life into it. You don't need a studio, a microphone, or even an audience to start practicing this. Emma began reading short news articles out loud, but this time she added feeling. She emphasized words that carried excitement, suspense, or importance. She practiced slow, deliberate pauses just like the anchor. At first, it felt dramatic, even silly, but that's exactly how broadcasters train. They exaggerate, they experiment, they play. And through play, they internalize patterns that later feel natural. The next insight came from observing storytelling techniques. Broadcasters are masters of structure. They know how to grab attention, build tension, and deliver information in a way that keeps viewers glued. Emma realized she could apply this to her English practice. She started narrating her day not as a list of actions, but as a story. This morning, the sun was barely awake when I spilled coffee on my notebook. I panicked, but then I laughed at myself. Suddenly, her sentences weren't just correct, they were alive. She noticed how storytelling made her speech smoother because her brain was predicting what comes next, just like it does when you follow a narrative. And here's a secret that most learners ignore. Broadcasters also use micro-improvisation. They don't rely solely on scripts. They respond naturally to changes, interruptions, and unexpected moments. Emma started mimicking this by practicing spontaneous speaking exercises. She'd set a timer for 1 minute and talk about a random topic without stopping, letting ideas flow naturally. At first, it was chaotic. She stumbled, repeated words, paused awkwardly, but gradually her brain adapted. She began to trust her own voice, a critical step toward natural fluency. Think about how often you hesitate in English, afraid of making mistakes or sounding unnatural. Broadcasters feel that too, but they've trained themselves to keep going despite the fear. Emma learned that the act of continuing, even imperfectly, builds momentum and confidence. Every sentence she delivered, regardless of mistakes, became a building block toward the voice she wanted. And the more she practiced, the less intimidating English felt. Then came the realization about intonation and stress patterns. English has a rhythm, almost musical in nature, and broadcasters exploit it to hold attention. Some words are emphasized, others glide by, some sentences speed up, some slow down. Emma had been mimicking phrases, but now she focused on the music of English. She practiced reading poetry, short dialogues, and even song lyrics to understand pitch, stress, and flow. She discovered that mastering rhythm in English doesn't just improve pronunciation. It transforms how your message is perceived. You start sounding confident, engaging, and natural. Emma also explored the importance of body language and facial expression. You might wonder why this matters if you're speaking alone, but broadcasters know that how you feel in your body affects how your voice sounds. She practiced in front of a mirror, noticing her posture, how her shoulders relaxed, how her mouth shaped words. Even recording herself on video made a difference. Her voice became steadier, more expressive, and more convincing. This physical connection to speech is a subtle trick that most learners overlook, yet it's crucial for fluency that feels effortless. Here's a practical exercise Emma discovered. She would pick a news segment, mute the audio, and try to narrate it herself, matching the emotions and gestures she saw on the screen. It was difficult at first. Her timing was off, her voice didn't always match. But this kind of multi-sensory practice accelerated her learning. By combining listening, speaking, and movement, she was training not just her mouth but her brain to think like a broadcaster. Then there's the psychology of voice. Broadcasters often speak in a way that builds trust and authority, and Emma realized that confidence comes not only from practice but also from mindset. She started telling herself, "I can communicate clearly. My voice matters. My thoughts are valid." These affirmations, combined with deliberate practice, helped her reduce hesitation and speak more assertively. Fluency isn't just technical, it's deeply psychological. Emma also discovered the value of repetition with variation. Broadcasters don't just read the same script over and over, they tweak, change emphasis, experiment with phrasing. She practiced the same sentence multiple ways, trying different intonations, speeds, and moods. Each variation built flexibility in her speech, allowing her to adapt naturally in real conversations. She realized that fluency isn't rigid perfection. It's the ability to express the same thought in multiple ways, effortlessly. Imagine speaking English with the same adaptability as a professional anchor, able to respond to any situation without freezing, without hesitation, almost instinctively. That's what Emma was building. It's not magic. It's consistent, thoughtful, and playful practice, combined with attention to emotion, rhythm, and mindset. Emma then faced a challenge that many learners encounter: understanding fast speech. Broadcasters often speak quickly, especially during live events, and it's easy to feel overwhelmed. She realized the trick isn't to try to understand every word, it's to catch the meaning, the patterns, the chunks. She began listening to podcasts at faster speeds, focusing on key phrases and the overall message rather than every single word. Over time, her comprehension improved, and her own speech speed naturally increased. She was training her brain to process English in real time. Another secret technique Emma adopted was shadowing. She would play a short audio clip and speak along with it simultaneously, trying to match the tone, speed, and rhythm. It was exhausting at first. Her voice lagged, her timing slipped. But after consistent practice, she noticed something remarkable. Her brain and mouth began syncing naturally, and she could speak longer sentences without thinking about individual words. This is one of the core methods broadcasters use to develop both fluency and confidence. And let's not forget the importance of curiosity and context. Broadcasters are constantly learning new words, current events, cultural references. Emma started following this approach. She read articles she found interesting, watched videos about topics she loved, and noted down phrases and expressions she didn't know. Learning English this way made it meaningful, not mechanical. When words are tied to ideas you care about, your brain remembers them and your speech becomes more authentic. Before we pause, here's a critical insight. Fluency is a combination of skill, awareness, and courage. Skill comes from repetition and practice. Awareness comes from noticing intonation, rhythm, body language, and emotion. Courage comes from continuing despite mistakes, from trusting your voice. Emma had been building all three layers, and the results were becoming evident. She felt lighter, faster, more expressive. English was no longer a barrier, it was a tool for her voice, her expression, her story. And here's the teaser for the next part. So far, Emma has built the foundation of fluency and learned to speak with emotion and rhythm. Next, we'll explore how broadcasters master persuasion, audience connection, and storytelling under pressure, techniques that make their words unforgettable. You'll see exactly how to apply these methods in your own speech so that English stops being just a language and becomes a way to influence, inspire, and engage. Because here's the truth: fluency isn't the final goal. It's the doorway to expressing yourself fully, confidently, and meaningfully in any situation. Emma's journey has grown from practicing words to creating connection, and the next step is where the real magic happens. Emma had reached a point where English was no longer just a collection of words. She could speak in chunks with rhythm, emotion, and confidence. But fluency, she discovered, is only part of the story. The next level was connection, the kind of connection broadcasters create with their audience, a connection that keeps people watching, listening, and feeling every word. And that's where Emma's real transformation began. She remembered watching a live debate one evening. The anchor wasn't just fluent, she was persuasive. Every sentence felt intentional, every word carefully chosen to guide the viewer's attention. Emma realized that broadcasters don't just speak English, they speak to people. Their words are tools to inform, influence, or inspire. And if she wanted to speak like them, she needed to learn this too. You don't need a microphone or a studio to start practicing connection. Emma began with something simple, reading aloud as if someone was listening. She imagined a friend across the room, nodding, reacting, or asking questions. Suddenly, reading wasn't mechanical anymore. It became interactive. She started varying her tone, asking rhetorical questions, pausing for emphasis, and even smiling as she spoke. The experience transformed her voice, making it warmer, engaging, and alive. Then came the insight about persuasive speech. Broadcasters know that every message carries subtle cues, tone, pacing, emphasis, that guide how an audience feels. Emma studied interviews and speeches, noticing patterns, slowing down for important points, raising intonation to indicate excitement, softening the voice to convey empathy. She began practicing these patterns, recording herself and comparing it to professional broadcasts. Slowly, she noticed the difference. Her sentences weren't just correct, they were compelling. Next, Emma learned about story arcs. Broadcasters don't just deliver information, they structure it. A good story has a beginning, middle, and end, with tension, resolution, and sometimes suspense. Emma applied this to everyday practice. She would narrate a simple event, like her walk in the park, but in story form. The sun was low in the sky, shadows stretched across the path, and I noticed something unusual. Suddenly, her speech flowed naturally, as if the listener was part of the story. This kind of thinking is what makes spoken English engaging. It's the difference between reading and performing. Here's a little challenge for the audience. Pick an ordinary event from your day and narrate it in 3 sentences first, then expand it into a full story. Emphasize emotion, pauses, and rhythm. This is exactly how broadcasters develop the skill to keep an audience hooked, even with mundane topics. Emma found this exercise both fun and transformational. Then she tackled stressful scenarios, another hallmark of professional fluency. Broadcasters often have to speak live, under pressure, with no time to prepare. Emma simulated this by giving herself on-the-spot topics. She'd pick a card with a word or idea and start speaking immediately without stopping. At first, she stumbled, paused awkwardly, and sometimes laughed at herself. But gradually her brain adapted. She learned to think in English, trust her words, and improvise confidently. This type of practice teaches a critical skill: fluency under pressure. Another breakthrough came with voice modulation. Emma realized that her voice didn't need to be perfect. It needed to convey authority, warmth, or urgency depending on the context. She practiced reading scripts in different emotional tones: serious, excited, calming, or dramatic. She recorded herself, listened, and adjusted. Broadcasters spend years mastering this subtle art, and by mimicking it, Emma's English became not just fluent but powerful. Imagine your English voice commanding attention in a room, over a Zoom call, or on a podcast. It's not just words, it's presence. Emma started noticing the impact of pacing. Pauses weren't mistakes, they were opportunities. A well-timed pause emphasizes importance, gives listeners a moment to digest and adds weight to your words. She practiced deliberately, inserting pauses in her narration, and felt a sense of control she had never experienced before. Emma also discovered the power of questioning and engagement. Broadcasters often ask questions, even rhetorical ones, to involve the audience. She began experimenting in her practice sessions. Have you ever noticed how some mornings feel heavier than others? Suddenly her audience, even if imaginary, felt included. This simple technique transforms speech from monologue to dialogue, and it dramatically increases fluency because your mind anticipates a response. Next, she explored layered practice, a technique broadcasters use to perfect delivery. Emma would first listen to a segment, then shadow it, then record herself, and finally narrate it without any reference. Each layer built confidence and adaptability. The repetition wasn't mechanical. It was dynamic, integrating voice, rhythm, emotion, and timing. She realized that fluency isn't a single skill, it's a combination of many small, practiced habits. Then came the challenge of authenticity. Broadcasters don't try to mimic someone else entirely, they infuse their personality into their speech. Emma realized this was key to sustaining fluency. She experimented with phrases and intonation that felt natural to her, even when learning from professionals. Over time, she began to develop her own voice, clear, confident, expressive, while still retaining the techniques she had learned. Think about the last time someone captivated you with their words. Chances are, it wasn't just what they said, it was how they said it. The emotion, timing, and rhythm made you lean in. That's exactly what Emma was learning, and it's what makes broadcasters unforgettable. Emma also tackled listening for nuance. Broadcasters don't just speak, they listen constantly, adjusting tone and phrasing in real time. She practiced by listening to podcasts and news clips, noting how small changes in emphasis could completely alter meaning. Then she mimicked those changes in her own speech, experimenting with subtleties. This skill trained her to respond naturally in conversation, improving both comprehension and fluency. Next, she focused on clarity under complexity. Broadcasters often explain complicated ideas in simple, engaging ways. Emma practiced taking a complex topic she knew, like a science fact or a news story, and summarizing it in plain, natural English. She emphasized key words, paused for effect, and made sure each sentence led smoothly to the next. Over time, she noticed her speech had become not just faster and smoother, but easier to follow, a hallmark of professional communication. Another key element was emotional resonance. Broadcasters know that facts alone rarely capture attention. Emotion drives engagement. Emma practiced reading stories with different emotional tones, exaggerating sadness, excitement, or surprise. Even small adjustments in pitch, volume, or speed made a noticeable difference. Her English was no longer just correct. It was compelling, alive, and persuasive. Before we pause, here's a crucial insight. Fluency isn't about eliminating mistakes, it's about creating connection. Emma's journey shows that professional-level English comes from combining rhythm, emotion, storytelling, and courage. She had progressed from basic fluency to broadcast-level engagement, and the next step would push her even further. The teaser for Part 4. So far, Emma has built confidence, rhythm, emotion, and audience connection. Next, we'll explore advanced techniques that broadcasters use to think quickly, handle live conversation, master persuasion, and even influence people subtly, all while sounding natural. These are the strategies that transform English from a language you use to a language you command. Emma's story is far from over. She's no longer the hesitant speaker she once was. She's evolving into a communicator who captivates, persuades, and inspires. And your journey can follow the same path. one deliberate, mindful step at a time. Emma had come a long way. She could speak fluently, express emotion, and tell stories that captured attention. But now she faced a new challenge, thinking in English in real time, the kind of skill broadcasters rely on every day during live segments, interviews, or breaking news. It was no longer enough to read, mimic, or rehearse. She needed to train her brain to respond instantly. She began with mental simulation exercises. Emma would imagine different scenarios, answering questions on the spot, explaining a topic to a friend, narrating unexpected events, and respond in English without pausing. At first it felt chaotic. Words stumbled, ideas jumbled, and self-doubt crept in. But broadcasters thrive in this chaos. They've trained their minds to anticipate language patterns, so sentences come naturally even under pressure. Emma kept practicing, and slowly her brain adapted. Thinking and speaking in English became one seamless process. Imagine being able to join a conversation, give your opinion, or explain something clearly in English without freezing, translating in your head, or feeling stressed. That's exactly what Emma was building step by step. Next, she tackled improvisation. Broadcasters often face unexpected questions, interruptions, or changes in scripts. Emma practiced by giving herself random topics to speak on for 1 minute, then 2 minutes, then 5 without preparation. At first, her sentences were short, halting, and repetitive. But over time she discovered a rhythm. Her brain began predicting natural phrases, her voice became steady, and her thoughts flowed more freely. Improvisation wasn't just a skill, it was a confidence booster. Then came the lesson about subtle persuasion. Emma noticed that professional broadcasters influence their audience not through force, but through choice of words, pacing, and tone. She studied phrases, sentence structures, and intonation patterns that made listeners feel engaged or convinced. For instance, emphasizing benefits rather than commands, asking rhetorical questions, or using pauses strategically. She practiced incorporating these techniques into everyday conversation, and it transformed not just how she spoke but how people responded to her. Emma also discovered the importance of contextual thinking. Broadcasters don't just memorize words, they understand situations. They adapt language to the audience, topic, and timing. Emma applied this by imagining different listeners, friends, teachers, strangers, and tailoring her speech accordingly. She realized that fluency isn't just about words or grammar, it's about fitting language to life. Another breakthrough was handling complex sentences naturally. Broadcasters often deliver long, intricate sentences without losing clarity. Emma practiced by taking paragraphs from articles and summarizing or paraphrasing them aloud, keeping them coherent and engaging. She experimented with linking words, intonation, and pacing. Gradually, her brain learned to manage complexity without hesitation, a skill that separates fluent speakers from merely functional ones. Imagine explaining a complicated idea, telling a story, or debating a topic in English confidently, without pausing to translate, and keeping your audience fully engaged. That's exactly what Emma was building through deliberate, layered practice. Next, Emma focused on voice control under pressure. She noticed that broadcasters modulate pitch, tone, and speed depending on context. Calm for serious news, energetic for excitement, persuasive for interviews. She practiced reading aloud, mimicking these variations and recording herself. Each playback highlighted areas to improve, from awkward stresses to rushed sentences. This careful self-observation helped her develop a natural, dynamic voice. Then she experimented with mirroring audience engagement. Broadcasters often read the reactions of their viewers or listeners and adjust accordingly. Emma simulated this by imagining responses, questions, or confusion from her audience. She practiced clarifying, emphasizing, and rephrasing in real time. This created a sense of interaction, training her brain to respond fluently and naturally in conversations. Emma also learned about the subtle power of phrasing. Broadcasters carefully choose words that are easy to follow, vivid, and memorable. She began rewriting her own sentences, replacing generic phrases with descriptive, precise language. Instead of "I saw a dog," she might say, "A golden retriever bounded across the park, wagging its tail like it owned the world." The difference was striking. Her speech became more engaging, more visual, more alive. Think about how much impact your words could have if each sentence was vivid, expressive, and naturally fluent. That's the level Emma was now training toward. Next came advanced listening practice. Broadcasters train not just to speak, but to understand nuance in others' speech. Emma listened to interviews, podcasts, and debates, noting subtle changes in tone, pacing, and emotion. Then she practiced repeating or paraphrasing what she heard, keeping both meaning and feeling intact. This exercise built real-time comprehension and adaptive response skills, essential for natural fluency. She also explored emotional pacing, adjusting speed and rhythm to match the mood of her speech. Broadcasters know that slowing down creates suspense, speeding up adds excitement, and varying pace maintains attention. Emma practiced narrating the same story with different pacing patterns, observing how it changed impact. Her speech became flexible, expressive, and commanding. Then came a critical insight. Fluency is fueled by curiosity and risk-taking. Broadcasters often try new words, phrases, and styles, experimenting to find what resonates. Emma adopted the same mindset. She challenged herself with unfamiliar topics, practiced new vocabulary and context, and allowed herself to make mistakes. Each failure became a stepping stone. She learned that fluency grows fastest when you push beyond comfort zones. Here's a small exercise for the audience. Pick a random topic, set a timer for 2 minutes, and speak continuously in English. Don't worry about mistakes. Focus on rhythm, tone, and connecting ideas naturally. That's how broadcasters train mental agility and fluency, and that's exactly what Emma was doing. Next, she refined sentence linking and cohesion. Broadcasters connect ideas smoothly, using conjunctions, transitions, and emphasis to maintain flow. Emma practiced by reading paragraphs, then paraphrasing them aloud with natural connectors. Meanwhile, as a result, her sentences became longer, smoother, and easier to follow. She realized that linking thoughts effectively is a hallmark of high-level English fluency. Finally, Emma explored auditory imagination, the ability to hear English in your head before speaking. Broadcasters often visualize or anticipate words, which allows faster, smoother delivery. She practiced by imagining conversations or narrations silently, then speaking them aloud. This bridged the gap between thought and speech, reducing hesitation and increasing natural flow. Before we pause, here's a critical takeaway. Advanced fluency isn't about perfection. It's about thinking fast, responding naturally, connecting with emotion, and experimenting boldly. Emma had moved from basic fluency to thinking, improvising, and influencing in English. She was now speaking like a broadcaster, not just repeating words but commanding them. The teaser for Part 5. So far, Emma has learned rhythm, emotion, improvisation, persuasion, and mental agility. The next part will focus on mastering consistency, refining style, and achieving effortless, long-term fluency. The final stage that turns English from a learned skill into an integral part of who you are. Emma's journey is approaching its peak, and the final techniques will reveal how any learner can speak English naturally, confidently, and powerfully, just like a professional broadcaster. Emma had come a long way. From stumbling over words to speaking in chunks, from hesitating to improvising confidently, and from reading aloud to captivating listeners with emotion and rhythm, she had transformed. But the final frontier wasn't just skill, it was consistency, style, and effortless mastery. This is where broadcasters truly shine, and now, Emma was ready to embrace it. She began by reflecting on the journey itself. Broadcasters maintain fluency because they practice with purpose every single day. Emma realized that short bursts of focused practice beat long, irregular sessions. She committed to a daily routine, listening actively, shadowing, narrating stories, improvising, and recording herself. Each session reinforced what she had learned, strengthened her neural pathways, and made English feel like second nature. Think about fluency as a muscle. If you train it every day, even for 20 to 30 minutes, it grows stronger and more natural. Neglect it and it weakens. Consistency is the secret that keeps broadcasters sounding polished and confident. Next, Emma focused on style refinement. Broadcasters have a recognizable style, clear, confident, engaging. Emma experimented with hers. She analyzed which words felt natural, which tones suited her personality, and how to maintain rhythm without sounding forced. She practiced with scripts, live audio, and spontaneous speech, gradually weaving her unique voice into everything she said. The result? English no longer felt foreign, it was her voice. Then came the lesson of effortless fluency. Broadcasters appear natural because they have internalized patterns so deeply that they don't think about them consciously. Emma began reviewing past exercises and noticing how certain phrases, intonation patterns, and chunks had become automatic. She no longer paused to translate or search for words. Her sentences flowed smoothly, rhythmically, and expressively. This is the hallmark of mastery, fluency without effort. Emma also embraced audience perspective even when practicing alone. Broadcasters constantly anticipate how listeners will perceive their words. Emma imagined a real audience, friends, mentors, or even viewers she might speak to on camera. She adjusted tone, emphasized key points, and ensured clarity. By doing this, she trained her speech to be not just correct but impactful. Another breakthrough was self-feedback loops. Broadcasters review, adjust, and refine constantly. Emma recorded her sessions, listened critically, and made small adjustments. Maybe a pause was too long, a word was mispronounced, or emotion was missing. She corrected it, tried again, and repeated. These loops didn't just improve her speech. They built confidence, self-awareness, and independence in learning. Imagine having the ability to assess your own English like a professional, noticing patterns, improving weaknesses, and enhancing strengths. This skill alone sets fluent speakers apart from casual learners. Emma also focused on long-form fluency. Speaking smoothly for a few sentences is one thing. Sustaining natural speech for 5, 10, or 15 minutes is another. She practiced narrating full stories, giving mock presentations, and explaining complex topics continuously. At first, fatigue caused errors, but her stamina grew with practice. Broadcasters train this endurance constantly, and Emma learned that fluency isn't just accuracy, it's the ability to sustain flow under real conditions. Then came style versatility. Broadcasters switched tones depending on context. Serious, humorous, persuasive, informative. Emma practiced reading different types of content. News, interviews, literature, podcasts, even casual conversations. Each style required slight adjustments in pitch, pacing, and phrasing. By mastering versatility, she became capable of speaking English naturally in any situation. Next, she refined advanced intonation and subtlety. Broadcasters convey nuance through tiny shifts in pitch and stress. Emma practiced softening her voice for empathy, emphasizing words for impact, and adjusting rhythm to guide attention. Subtle changes made her speech more expressive and engaging, proving that fluency isn't just about words, it's about delivery and feel. Emma also learned the power of storytelling across contexts. Broadcasters tell stories whether reporting news, hosting shows, or interviewing guests. She practiced integrating narrative elements into casual conversation, professional presentations, and teaching moments. Storytelling made her English memorable, fluid, and relatable. She realized that fluency is amplified when content is compelling, not just correct. Here's a small exercise for the audience. Take any daily event and narrate it in story form for 2 minutes. Focus on rhythm, emotion, and structure. This builds both fluency and engagement the same way broadcasters train. Emma didn't forget mistakes as learning tools. Broadcasters rarely freeze when errors happen. They recover gracefully. Emma continued making errors in practice and live exercises but used each mistake to improve. Over time she became fearless. She could speak continuously, adapt in real time, and focus on expression rather than perfection. Confidence, she discovered, is just as important as technique. Finally, Emma embraced the lifelong learning mindset. Broadcasters never stop improving. They read, listen, explore, and adapt. Emma adopted this habit. Every day she sought new vocabulary, new expressions, and new speaking challenges. She listened to different accents, styles, and contexts, keeping her English dynamic and alive. Fluency, she realized, isn't a final destination. It's an ongoing journey. Imagine speaking English naturally, confidently, and expressively, not just in practice but in real life. Every conversation feels smooth, every thought flows, and your voice carries meaning and emotion. That's what broadcasters achieve, and that's what Emma had built, and what you can build too. As Emma reflected on her journey, she realized a truth that applies to every learner. Fluency isn't about perfection, memorization, or imitation. It's about consistency, practice with purpose, awareness, courage, and curiosity. By combining rhythm, emotion, improvisation, storytelling, persuasion, and adaptability, she had transformed English from a challenging foreign language into a tool for expression, influence, and creativity. The final takeaway is simple. Follow the broadcaster's path step by step. Listen actively. Mimic consciously. Practice daily. Experiment boldly. Record, review, and refine. Engage emotion. Tell stories. Think in English. Embrace mistakes. And never stop exploring. Emma's story had reached a new level. She could speak fluently, expressively, and confidently. She had transformed her voice into an instrument that carried both meaning and emotion. And while her journey would continue, just like every broadcaster's, the foundation was solid. English was no longer a barrier. It was her voice, her tool, and her story. You don't need to be born fluent. You don't need talent or perfect grammar. What you need is dedicated practice, awareness, courage, and curiosity, all things that broadcasters master and all things you can achieve step by step. Your fluency journey starts now, and like Emma, you can transform not just how you speak English but how the world hears your voice.